Hi everyone, and again, thanks for being with me. I'm going to talk about my most favourite person today, and I have many, but in this case, it's Alan Jones, the guy that allegedly has been abusing people for many, many years. Still remains to be seen as to whether Jones is going to sue any of the people that have made those allegations. We will wait patiently and see. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the fact that Jones is no longer relevant, and one of those is this post he posted on ADHD, which I think stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. But nevertheless, here he is talking about a subject which hopefully had been forgotten. But he wants to raise this issue because to him, this makes him relevant. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the issues around COVID have gone, even though COVID still is present in our community, and there are still people affected by it, and there is still a stack of people who haven't been vaccinated. Now, in this particular case, he is still insisting that we use or think about using certain drugs which have been proved not to be effective, unless you're a horse or an animal. And of course, I'm talking about ivermectin. So this is this thing that Jones is talking about, which he believes is vitally important today to be discussing. Because in Jones's mind, it is important for him to move further and further to the right, to become part of the crazies of this world like he has never been before. Now, in the past, I'll admit that Jones kind of straddled a middle line. He didn't want to offend politicians too much, and he needed to have them on his show in order for him to have some sort of credibility. The man has no longer any credibility. He's gone to a paltry little site that he's set up in order to promote primarily himself and extreme right-wing views. All power to him. I'm here to challenge those views, to let you know that there are people like him out there propagating ideas which are foundless and which we should be noting as being irrelevant today. So I'm going to play this clip of him talking about some of this stuff, and I'll talk to you as we go through it.
There were, as you know, during coronavirus, we were all forced to be vaccinated. Mandated, they call it.
The vaccine mandate has kicked in.
The government has already...
I love the way Jones is talking about something we all know actually happened. Yes, we were mandated, and the reasons for that have been discussed by everybody. And there have been a lot of people who have objected to the fact that we were mandated. And fine, that's their right to object to having to have the jab.
Already mandated vaccination.
It's not a choice to get vaccinated.
Enforcement measures in place will make sure that everyone is vaccinated.
You must get...
So it's comforting that he's covered New Zealand, Canada and Australia, and particularly the person he loves the most, Dan Eng.
Vaccinated.
The regulatory authority, amongst others here, is the TGA, the Therapeutic Goods Administration.
What is the TGA? We regulate therapeutic goods in Australia, including how they are manufactured and advertised. We are part of the Australian Government Department of Health.
Is it true that Australia has the highest proportion of funding of these regulatory bodies by drug companies?
In Australia, the regulator takes 96% of its funding from pharma.
96% of funding of the TGA comes from the pharmaceutical industry.
96% of the funding, as I understand it, for these regulatory authorities comes from...
And he's right. And this is one of those moments where I would tend to agree with him because the facts are quite simple. So what happens is that if you have a drug that you want to put into the marketplace and you want the TGA approval, then you have to pay for them to do the evaluation of that particular drug. Now that in itself is not an inexpensive process, but what it does do is, I guess the positive side of that is it rules out every Tom, Dick and Harry who thinks they've got this new marvellous inventive drug which hasn't got the research behind it to prove that the drug is effective. So what happens is organisations, such as the many pharmaceutical companies that have got the ability to be able to finance this stuff, they're the ones that put their proposal before the TGA. Now, this doesn't mean that the TGA needs to accept everything that's placed before them, simply because they do their own investigation and they do their own assessment. But if you want them to assess your stuff, you have to pay for it. Now, this is not a very transparent process. I understand that, but nevertheless, this is the way our system works. In fact, most systems around the world work similarly, but it is worth noting that the TGA is part of the health department. So it doesn't sit outside of, it isn't that independent, it is part of the Department of Health. And certainly the Department of Health could change the way they actually do things in relation to transparency. So how much do organisations give them for this process? And also, it is true, I think, that 9 out of 10 proposals put before the TGA are actually approved. But we do have to remember that the people that are putting that forward are those people that have done the research. They've got lots of studies in order to support it and to back it up. They have spent the money to ensure that someone like the TGA will approve it. They're not going to put something before the TGA that will not be approved. And there have been lots of examples around the world where people have endeavoured to put forward suggestions to the FDA in the United States and to TGA here that have not been approved, simply because the research does not support them. Elizabeth Holmes is one of those persons, I hasten to add. And I do know that because the pharmaceutical companies are so powerful, that they will try and influence the decisions within the TGA. I understand that, and for that reason, we need to be rather sceptical. Now, the problem that I have with Jones is that he does then take a divergent turn in terms of looking at alternatives to COVID that were not passed by TGA or any other organisation around the world, because those particular products were deemed only available primarily in the context of animals. And so they did not suit or fit with our particular, or particularly human beings. Simple as that. They did not fit. So therefore, they did not pass the test in terms of TGA approval as COVID-19 drugs. Now, what this tells us about Jones is that he continually wishes to live in the past. It seems very important to Jones to be able to talk about things such as this and not to be able to come to the realisation that this moment's moved on, that we don't need to be looking for these so-called wacky alternatives in order to deal with COVID-19. COVID-19 is still present. We still have vaccinations for that. They have been approved. Now, the other thing that I do agree with is that clearly Pfizer and other organisations have made billions of dollars from this opportunity that presented itself because of the pandemic. I understand that. Any organisation, I guess, that had their finger on the pulse, that had a sense that this was likely to happen, probably had done some research prior to all of this and already had in the can, if you like, the information and the research that was needed to be able to pass by the appropriate authority. So I understand all of that. The question I'm asking is, why is it now that he has decided to come forward with this rehashing, I should say, of this old trope in relation to ivermectin and other drugs that were discouraged from being used, it makes me think about the time Trump got up there and suggested that we could put some light rays through us and somehow that would get rid of it. And these are the sort of people like Alan Jones and Trump that we're relying on for information about what is in our best interest in terms of our health. And I find it appalling, and I find it a disgrace that this man has chosen to start to talk about all of this stuff again. But there again, clearly the man doesn't have all that much to talk about. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Remember to subscribe to my channel. Let me know also whether you're still being vaccinated or not, whether you think vaccines actually do work in terms of at least some sort of protection. Also, let me know whether you've had an experience with COVID recently. I certainly know of one person, a partner of a friend of mine who has. Do vaccines, in your view, work? Is it still current? Is this still an issue that we still need to be talking about? Or has that time passed? Let me know what you think in the comments below. In the meantime, take care, look after yourselves, and more importantly, be safe.